Hello, Cinsanity, and welcome to another episode of our podcast. This week, we are joined by guest Mark Newell of Tecomate Seeds. Mark is a wildlife biologist, and he is coming on to talk about land management as far as white-tailed deer are concerned, and everyone's favorite topic, food plots. So, what do you say we get this thing started? So, guys, we got Mark Newell coming on today. I'll let him get into his background, but he's the biologist for Tecomate Seed. I've known him for a while. He's actually been to the farm, Graham. He's from Mississippi, loves the food plot game and deer hunting, but he's also a big-time turkey hunter, as you well know them boys from Mississippi and Alabama are. So he's going to call us here in a minute. We get to talk about food plots today, which everybody loves them, even though I don't know that I've killed a mature buck. I've killed one buck in a food plot. That's it. What about you, Jay? How many you killed? Graham's killed one in a food plot. Same as mine. Frost-seeded clover, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I haven't killed any bucks in a food plot. I mean, just natural agricultural beans. Killed them in that, but not an actual food plot.
I mean, most of the time I'm hunting, I'm in the timber. So, well, that's because I'm usually hunting a rut, though, too.
Yep.
All right, boys. This is Mark. Mark, you got Jay and Graham on here with you.
What's going on, guys?
How's it going?
How are you doing, man?
Man, doing great.
I gave him a little bit of background on you, but why don't you go ahead and just kind of tell him what your role is there at Tecomate, TV show co-host, and kind of your background on how you got into all this.
Yeah, no problem. I am, like I said, I've been with Tecomate, I guess, initially for about 14 years. We have a seed company that's been in the business for a long time. So I came on there, again, 14 years ago as a biologist. I am a wildlife biologist, and it's a very, very long story. But so, and then that basically turned into still the biologist, but also a seed rep for the seed company. And I'm still doing that today. I'm general manager of the seed company. However, the seed company and all of the TV stuff is completely separate now. It's two completely different companies. David Morris and I have Tecomate Properties, which under Tecomate Properties is our two TV shows, Bucks Tecomate, Tecomate Whitetail Nation. And now the seed company is owned by a bigger seed company in Pennsylvania, Roar Seed. So, which was great for that company because that was the biggest part where the company needed to grow, which was the Northeast. So, I mean, we're still dominated sales-wise in the South, and hence why I'm still, because I live here in Mississippi, so running the majority of things here because that's just where all the food plot sales are. And I don't know if you guys realize this, but probably 80% of food plot sales come from Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Everything else is, picks up that other 20%. It's a lot of food plots planted in the South. And mainly because of the size of the plots, most likely, because we plant a lot of big stuff here. And so there's that. So still a lot of other things going on that I do. I still do consulting with Newell Wildlife Services. So it's always busy, man. So anyway, there's the very quick rundown of what's going on with me.
So with the TV show, tell me, how's your season been so far?
It actually started off very well. Got to kill an elk in West Texas, and I didn't even realize the elk hunting was that good out there on a 60,000 acre ranch, and we had to drive through, I think, 200,000 acre ranches or something stupid to get to the 60,000 acre ranch. But Texas is always about big land, and then the further west you go, the land even gets bigger. And just had a phenomenal hunt out there. And one thing that I've learned as a biologist, and I've managed property all over, as a whole and as a state, nobody manages their private lands like Texas. I mean, I'm from Mississippi, and I have to acknowledge that. But so this particular, it's just like they do deer, just like anything else. It's managed for age class. They only take so many elk off this property. And, and of course, all of the bordering landowners, they kind of do the same thing. So you've got hundreds of thousands of acres that is managed for older age class elk. And the elk in West Texas are not as big as they would be, say, in a New Mexico and, parts of Colorado and Utah and some of those places. But the experience was phenomenal. I mean, of course, right out of the gate, I killed mine the very first afternoon, an 8 or 9-year-old elk. And we called it in from, he was 500-600 yards away, called him all the way in to 100 yards and kill him. And then we went with the other guys, which was so fun. Then I become kind of somewhat of a guide, staying with the hunter or whatever while the guide's doing the calling and all of that. And that was just a trip. It was encounter after encounter after encounter. Again, they're looking for a certain age class. Not necessarily how big the antlers are, but a certain age class. And then we finally just had a phenomenal hunt up in the middle of the day and was able to kill one with the other guy. And then the next morning, the next guy killed. Of course, we were doing interview stuff for the show, and we've videoed both of those hunts, those first 2 hunts. But it was phenomenal. And that was my first elk. I don't know if you guys have ever elk hunted before, but, man, I'm telling you, I'm a huge turkey hunter. Clayton knows this. I mean, I'm a bigger turkey hunter than I am a deer hunter. And I always tell people I make a living deer hunting and I live to turkey hunt. But anyway, I mean, it's like calling in a 900-pound turkey, and it was just a phenomenal experience. So my season in early October was pretty much met right there, And then as far as the show-wise, we went down to one of our ranches in Texas, and my son Joshua, who's 8 years old, and now don't get that 8-year-old and thinking he's this little novice, because the kid killed a grand slam at 4. And he's killed probably 20, 30 turkeys, and he's only 8, and he's probably killed, I don't know, that many deer. So we went, and he's my new favorite hunting partner, and I get to hunt with a lot of great people, and he's my favorite. There's no better camp than that. So he shot a couple bucks. I was able to shoot a really nice buck. I say a nice buck, 150-inch deer, really cool-looking buck. Anyway, old buck. So we had a great hunt there. And here just recently, and when Clayton and I was trying to communicate, I was down in Natchez, Mississippi on a property that I manage with little to no cell service, and trying to communicate with Clayton, trying to get all this set up, and had a great hunt down there. We had to hunt hard, but the target buck we were after, an old 6.5-year-old buck, was able to kill him, a nice 10-pointer. So I've killed 2. David's had great, the other co-host of the show. He's had some phenomenal hunts as well. So as a show, I mean, we're pretty much done as far as getting content for our show. And to be done in first week of December, we've been very, very blessed. Very, very blessed.
It sounds a lot like Jay this year.
I don't know.
Now, as for the other 2 of us, I don't know. I will say, Mark, though, I'm probably a part of one of the most mind-boggling turkey hunting blunders you've ever been a part of.
Oh, my gosh. I don't even want to talk about that. Man, why'd you have to bring that up?
Because I just laugh about it every time I think about it now.
I mean, it's embarrassing. I'll just have to say. So anyway, so we go to Clayton's farm, and Mike and Brooke, who is the producers of our TV show, they do all the editing and used to do a lot of filming. And they have kids now, so they just do a lot of the editing. They still do some stuff that we get together. We don't get together near as much as we used to, and it used to be. There's such a close-knit part of, Tecomate. Without them, we don't have a show. And, so kudos goes out to any editors and producers out there, trying to tip my hat to Clayton there. Anyway, so people just don't understand what goes on behind the scenes. And I say that because I know Clayton does. So, we go, and I was already at another farm and had shot 1 turkey there, and you can shoot 2 in Kentucky. So Mike and Brooke were going to hunt up there, and I said, hey, man, come over here. So we go, and we ended up, long story short, roosting 3 longbeards, and they were right by this old tobacco barn. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to get set up, and I'm like, let's just set up in the barn. You know, they've lived by this barn all their life. They ain't worried about this barn. So we get set up in the barn, and we had these grand idea of, hey, let's kill all three of them. You know, with one, two, three, and three of us shoot. And anyway,
britches may have gotten a little bit big for us.
Just a little much, and we spread out a little too far. And I've done it. I hate to even have to say this because it's been a lot. Probably 40 times or more where we've 1, 2, 3'd and killed 2. I mean, that's a common thing. It's almost every year that I do that with somebody. And did it again with the buddy from Alabama here in Mississippi this past spring. And have never had an issue with it, but you're standing so close together. So as we're trying to get hid, we really got spread too far apart. So anyway, it was again, a lot of
a lot of empty shells, not a lot of dead birds.
A lot of high hopes. But anyway, so the turkeys fly down. They work their way in. Clayton tries to count because he's in the middle, and by the time he gets to 2, mine's already veered off, and I have no shot. And I don't know. It was just an ever more goat roping. And then when the 3-note shoot came about, it was a lot of shells shot. And at the end of the day, when the dust and the feathers settled, there was 1 dead turkey. So that was it.
And it was all on film.
It was all on film. So
we buried that one.
We buried it. I never looked at it. Never saw it. Don't want to see it. So, Mike, if you got that somewhere, don't send it to me. Hopefully you set fire to it or something. But anyway. Anyway, crazy times. Crazy times.
Yeah. So, anyways, let's get back to your roundhouse area, or your wheelhouse, excuse me. So, when it comes to whitetails, what are kind of the basic nutrients, deer need to maximize antler growth during different stages of the year? And you don't have to get in the weeds on it, just kind of in general to kind of set up, what everyone loves, which is the food plot of this.
Sure. Well, I'm going to back up just one more step from that. Anytime, and everybody thinks food primarily when you're managing whitetails, and I got to have food, I got to have food, I got to have food. Well, number one, you've got to say that again?
I think cover. You need cover first.
Right. Well, what I was getting to is it's even more simple than that. Look at your property. What is the most limiting factor on your property? Okay. Is it cover? Is it food? Whatever that is. In Texas, water. If you ain't got water, you don't have deer. I mean, you don't have anything. So what is your biggest limiting factor? When you go out west, when you go to the Midwest, a lot of times cover is number one. You got food, you just need some good quality cover. And with good quality cover also gives you native food. So you have to understand that as well. Here in the Southeast, primarily, there's cover everywhere. It's very heavily forested. There's plenty of cover. So typically food is the issue unless you're hunting in the Delta and some of these ag presents, but that's just a small percentage. So food then becomes the number one limiting factor. Water's not, because there's creeks everywhere. And even with that, though, we'll even put in water points just to keep the water closer to the bedding and the food so they don't have to travel as much. So there's a lot that goes into managing a property than just saying, hey, I need the best food that's out there. But by saying that, it is a very integral and primary thing that we do, that I do on all properties, regardless of where we're at, is honing that property in on food. Because if you got the best buffet in town, then you're going to have deer coming there. But like you said earlier, cover and food is, kind of the two most important things. There's some places that we do very little food, but we try to put more cover in. Planting, different native grasses, or planting trees, or planting whatever to increase the cover. And then a lot of times it's just simply go in and disc it and don't touch it. Just allow it to grow up. Give it a few years. It's amazing, what nature will do. It's amazing what's in the seed bank if you will just allow it to mature and go from there. So look at the property, look at your neighbor's property, because if you just have 80 acres or 100 acres, unless you got 2,000 acres or more, you've got to figure out what the neighbors is doing, what's on their properties. They may have all the food that you ever need. You just need some cover so they can live, and then you get between the cover and then the food, bam, you got a great hunting place. So now let's go back to food and try to answer your question. So with and it just depends on what you're thinking about. Number one, they need food for antler development. And when is that? That is during the spring. That is during the summer. So they need food during that time, actually more than ever, if they're going to be all that they can be. Just to give you a quick rundown on genetics. All right, the good Lord puts whatever's in that deer as a fawn what he can be. All right, does that make sense? So say his max rack is 170 inches. Okay, well, you can't go over that. Now, you can read some of the products and things, we can add to genetics. Well, that's bullcrap. That's just not happening, all right? So whatever's in him, there is a potential there. However, throughout his entire year, his entire life, he's got to get adequate protein, adequate fat, adequate nutrients in order to reach that potential. Does that make sense? So that's why the food is important, especially during the spring and summer. And I will even say, because you guys go up into more the north, into the Midwest where you get a lot of cold temperatures, late fall is also important, or late winter is also important, as those bucks are coming out of rut and trying to build back their bodies. So, and there's so many things that we could talk about. My goodness, and here my screen is yelling at me. So essentially, let's say you have, let's just look at say a 4 or 5 year old deer for an example. So that buck comes out of the fall into the winter. He's been rutting hard, and his body is, a lot of times they're skin and bones during that point. They have no fat. They don't even look like the same deer body-wise. So before they can start putting surplus nutrition to their antlers, they have to build their bodies back first. Does that make sense? So they'll build that. So it's an idea of maintenance. So they're just gouging, they're eating as much stuff as they can, and they're going to eat whatever, regardless if it's high protein or not. They're just going to eat whatever. So the best food that you can give them during that time, and it's
corn pile.
What's that? A corn
pile.
Well, corn helps. The thing is, and here's a great disclaimer about corn. Folks think corn really fattens deer up. Well, have you ever looked at an analysis on a corn bag? It's not a lot of fat in corn. It's really not. Now, it helps, and they eat it. I always said corn's like candy. They want to go after the candy, and they're going to eat it. A deer actually can starve to death on corn during that particular time, during that function. So, because just the fat content is not there. However, there's a lot of plants. That's why brassicas are important. There's a lot of sugar. There's a lot of fat in those brassicas, those bulbs. Especially in the Northeast, in Kentucky, we have a lot of acres and radishes and things of that nature just to give them the fat to get them back. But what I'm just trying to say is you need some food to get their bodies back. So as quick as they can get their bodies back and get healthy again, then you have what's called surplus nutrition, and then the more of that nutrition can go to their antlers. I've seen it so many different times when a buck reaches, say, 4.5. Typically at 4.5, this is an average. In Texas, probably 5 or 6. They become what's called a prime breeder. They're doing a lot of breeding. They're doing more chasing. They're doing more fighting. And a lot of times you don't see a jump between 4 and 5 like you should. The reason why is they hit it so hard, they never rebuild their bodies. So there was no surplus nutrition to go to the antlers. Does that make sense? So, So I've seen it time and time again. On our property in Mississippi that I just left from, I have a bunch of 5-year-olds that really didn't make that big of a jump from 4 to 5. And that's the reason. And we're giving them an awful lot of food, but still they're running, they're chasing, they're trying to breed. And some of them did better than others, but I've seen it time and time again where that happened. Let me give you this story here. We had this one giant buck. At 4.5, he become very identifiable. He was probably 180 inches as a 4-year-old. Had a lot of points going everywhere. We called him Swiss Army knife because he just had stuff going everywhere. It looked like he opened the Swiss Army knife up, which is rare for Mississippi because we don't see that kind of thing. So I'm like, look, guys, we got to give him another year. I know he's a giant, biggest deer any of y'all ever shot, but we've got to give him another year. And so we give him another year, and then the next year, I thought somebody had killed him somewhere because he turned into just a clean 10-pointer. Now, he was a big 10-pointer, but he was a clean 10-pointer. And I'm a camera nut, so I do all of my deer data, all of my deer censusing with cameras, so I just litter a property. So, and then I got to looking at him. He had some kind of split in his ear or, had some kind of identifying features. I'm like, that's Swiss Army. So I'm like, hold off, don't shoot him. Which was hard because now he's like a 175-inch 10-pointer, which is a giant, I'm like, hold off. This deer could be something special. If we can, let's hold off. And I'm so glad we did because the next year we killed him, he was 197 inches. But the reason why is he become a prime breeder. He was running and chasing like he's never done before. He didn't adequately build his body back, so he didn't make a jump from 4 to 5, but from 5 to 6, you're 22 inches or better, maybe 30 inches. I don't know exactly what the tape was. So anyway, I'm saying an awful lot because when you say that, it's such a loaded question on food. When do they need it? When do they don't need it? So I'll just stop right there for the next question, and we'll move from there.
Yeah, I figured as much. Most of these are going to be loaded questions because there's so much that goes into it that people don't understand. It's just this 30,000-foot view they get, and they see people on YouTube or on Outdoor Channel killing big bucks in a green food plot in November, and they're like, I got to have a food plot.
Right.
Well, most of the big deer I killed, that big one behind me, I killed him in the timber.
Right.
I didn't need a food plot to kill that deer.
Sure.
Now, it helps with his nutrition, maybe. But
Absolutely. Well, the thing is, in the big deer that I killed in Natchez just this past week, I tried to hunt him in food plots, and this gets into a whole nother topic. And actually, Mississippi State has done some really cool research on food plot stuff. They've tagged deer with GPS, and they're tracking deer, and they actually have got it down, at least in the South, because what applies in the South don't necessarily apply in the North. But it was really some really cool research where when do they use those food plots? What size food plots do they use during the daylight more than others? How close are they bedding to these food plots? All of this kind of stuff. So, and I've kind of known this anyway, so I tried to hunt him because we've had pictures mostly at night. And it's hard to get pictures on a food plot when you're hunting big food plots because they could come in so many different places. And never did see him. There was 2 different food plots, actually 3. There was one food plot that was about 3 acres that kind of run north and south. There was a smaller food plot of about 1.5 acres that was basically right on top. And then there was a giant food plot about a 1/4 mile away to the other side, back to the east, that's about 8 acres. Well, they're going to go to those food plots at some point in time, mostly at night. So the way I ended up killing him, there was right in the middle of the thicket, there was this huge lane, basically where they thin pines, they leave a lane in the middle of it, and you could see 200 yards, and that's where we got, and that's where we ended up killing him, right there in the middle of it all. Now, he was using the food plots, but we killed him in the woods. So a lot of times, especially in the South, you may not kill him in green, but you'll kill them close to it because guess what? That's where the does are going to go. And they will a lot of times, what I've learned in the South, and probably so in the North, what they'll do, they'll just get right on the edges a couple hundred yards away. Say, so you got a west wind. Well, they just get on the east side, 200 yards off that food plot, walk that edge. They can sit, check that whole entire food plot for any doe that's in heat, And the same thing, if any does are walking through there, they can pick up on their trail or whatever and get on it. So I've seen that happen so many times, and that's essentially how we killed that particular buck. But the food plots are essential on keeping the deer there. That's probably so there's 2 major things that food plot does. All right, number one, it gives nutrition, and I'm nutrition first. I don't care if I ever kill him. No problem. I don't care if we ever kill him in the food plot. I need to supply the nutrition because they need that. All right? So that's number one. Number two is I want to attract them and keep them on your property. Or I want to pull them off other people's property. So it's the attraction force. It's the suction force. I don't know about you guys, but in the South, we have all these catfish houses. All right, you have these catfish buffets, and they call it seafood, but it's completely different. The Southern seafood.
Graham knows.
If you,
I'm an Alabama boy, Mark.
there
so I
you go. You know what I'm talking about. So, and most of the time they're open on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and some of them are open on Sunday. Some of them aren't even open on Sundays. And I'm thinking, man, how do you make a living just on 3 days running a restaurant? Well, you go get in line, but you better get there early because it's amazing. People come from everywhere. It's like a tourist attraction. People will come from counties around coming to those things. So you need to go because this is the perfect analogy. So if you get good food plots that are highly diverse with all kinds of different things that those animals like, because it's sometimes they want to hit clover. It's sometimes they're going to hit the oats. It's sometimes they're going to hit the peas. Sometimes they're going to hit the brassicas. They usually never hit them all at one time. They just hit them at different times. So you want to have a very highly diverse food plot, obviously for nutrition, but also for attraction. Now, you may never kill a giant in it, but he's going to come to it. All the does are going to be coming to it. And it's amazing the better food plots you have and the more that you plant. So you may never see that deer early season, but come rut or even come post-rut, because there's no food anywhere else, if you have a season to hunt post-rut, that's the place to go because bucks will show up that you've never seen before.
I believe Graham and I were talking the other day. So we were talking like, you got the green screens.
Yeah.
Grows 12 foot tall, right?
Right.
Kind of sectioning food plots off. Graham, you got any questions on that as far as funneling deer?
Yeah, so I can't remember this gentleman's name. He's popped up on my social media a couple times, and he talks about creating those, like if you got if you're only able to hunt 80 acres and you got one food plot, and he talks about breaking up that food plot with those green screens and kind of creating like 3 or 4 or 5 little sections where it's like food plot here, green screen, and then it's like food plot on the other side, and kind of spacing it out and spreading it out. He talks about like he went from seeing one doe to bedding and giving birth to a fawn to end up having 4 does in one field, and he says it ended up bringing bucks. Instead of them spending 5 minutes searching through that one field, they end up spending 45 minutes, and because they're having to go and check all these like specific areas because they can't see it because of the green screens.
Sure. No, and again, it just depends on what part of the world that you're at. In the South, it doesn't work as much because you don't have you need to plant whatever open ground you have. You need to allocate as much of that as you can into actual food. There's some ways that you can do that with the screening. At Tecomate, we have a screening plot, and I use it. I use the screenings to like cover me entering and exiting a food plot. So I'll put a screen up right in front of the stand, right by a road or something, try to connect that with some other thick stuff, and maybe plant like a half acre or a quarter acre, just a long, narrow, very, very thick and tall strip where I can slip into a food plot and also slip out. The thing in hunting food plots is getting out. That hurts you more than getting in. So, and that's why so many times we try to limit certain areas in the mornings because you're going to booger them up trying to get in. However, if you can set it up where you can slip in and you can slip out, and that's one of the greatest advantages of a screen. All right, so when you go to green screening, if you have some really big fields that you're hunting and you want to break those fields up, that's where that definitely comes into play. And they work great for that. So a buck has obviously 2 major ways of finding does, and number one is smell. He's going to use the nose first. However, depending on the wind, depending on the setup, he's going to use those eyes. So those green screens, essentially, he can't see the whole. So one, he could walk up to the edge and look into that. Let's say a 10-acre field, and you own 80 acres, and he can look all the way across it. Oh, ain't nothing in there, and keep on rocking. But however, if it's broken up, I think probably what this guy was talking about, now I've got to walk through that opening, which could give you a shot, or walk through those screens, using those screens now as both cover, but also he's got to look in these other places. And most of the time, you can shoot into parts of those screens. He thinks he's safe, but he's actually not, and you can get a shot, especially with a rifle. But even with the bow, you can design those things where you can bring him right by if he takes one of those corridors or if he takes one of those openings. So that's where a lot of those so there's so many different things that you could use with screening that actually works very, very well. Now, one of the greatest ways, if you have enough ground, is corn is great for screening. And corn's also food, so that definitely works, definitely in the early season. If you're only using these corn for screens, in the late season, the snow's going to knock them down. It's not a lot of it. The deer's going to knock them down. Raccoons are going to knock them down. So in the late seeding, that screen kind of goes away. There's still some stuff there. But what you could do, you can mix that with some screening stuff that they're not going to eat. And so there's a lot of different methods, but totally 100%, I know what he's looking at. But if you just use them as a screen to be able to get in and to get out, to me, that's the number one best way. And then there's all kinds of different cool little things, especially if you got a big enough field where, hey, I'm going to section this 2 acres off and I'm going to plant this. I'm going to put a screen around it and then do that. There's just so many different ways you can do it. Or make corridors, forcing them into a shot with a bow or even a shot with a rifle or whatever. But no, totally get it. The screening deal, there's just so many different things that you can use that for that work to your advantage.
Well, that's like getting in and out. I mean, Jay, you killed a buck a couple of years ago in the morning on a cut bean field, and you had to wait until light to make sure the field was clear, didn't you?
Yeah, I've done this twice now where I've tried to, you got them on camera coming in the evenings, and you've hunted, and you hunted the evenings, and you don't see him. He's just, but the next day he's there, right? So
Right.
obviously, after several times of doing that, you're like, well, he knows I'm in here. Like that's the only like he's
Right.
watching me or something. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know exactly what he's doing, but he knows when I'm here. So I did it a couple years ago. Like Clayton said, I was like, well, I'm gonna go in the morning, and it's a cut bean field. Well, I hunt along the Ohio River.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's ag, so
Yep.
it's 600 acres of beans and corn. So the food's there.
Yep.
And I just waited till light, and make sure there's no deer in the field. And I just went like the farmer would drive down his driveway, park his truck, and I just like pretty much ran down the edge of this field. My stand was only like 10 yards inside a drainage. I snuck in that drainage and I climbed up, and I pulled my bow up, heard a grunt, I grunted, and I shot him in like 10 minutes. I wasn't in the stand for 10 minutes, but that's where he was bedding in there, but he could,
Yeah.
he knew when I was coming in there, like some way, somehow, he just knew when I was in there. But when I flipped the script on him, he
Sure.
was oblivious for me to come in the morning. But I also don't recommend hunting a food plot in the morning. Like if you're going to do it, you need to make sure it's clear.
Right.
If I
Right.
went in there at dark, I have no idea where he's at. Like he could be
Sure.
standing right in the middle of it.
Yep.
And I did it to a buck me and Clayton were trying to kill. Remember that, Clayton? You didn't go that morning. You slept in.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds like Clayton. I
well-
want to sleep in.
But anyways, you get the gist. Sometimes they'll pattern you, you know what I mean, and you got to switch it up.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, and I've killed quite a few good bucks too in the mornings, but setup is key. And the good thing, in bow hunting it's even harder. And I've gotten to the point where I'll do a lot of, when I was growing up, man, I mean, in first starting hunting, I wanted to get as high as I possibly could. I'm just telling you, I can't tell you how many deer I shoot off the ground now, because you can slip in and slip out so much easier. And we got camera guys. You guys know the way that is. I mean, it's double. I actually say it's triple the movement, triple the stuff that's there. I count the camera as an extra person. But hunting on the ground, man, we can just slip in and slip out. That buck, I ended up killing him in the afternoon, again, back in Mississippi. But we had this set up, and it was basically set. I mean, it's probably 2 feet off the ground, but you can take 2 steps, and you're right in that blind. And so we had it set up, and we'd get in there early, and just 2 steps, we're in the blind. I'm like, all right, don't cut any camera stuff on, no lights, no nothing. Let it start cracking before you turn anything on. And I mean, it's amazing how you can slip in and slip out and get into places. But, and that's, again, that goes to part on the setup. And one of the things that I do on these properties, number one, is we set it up. We get a property that's ours or a property that's a landowner's. Okay, number one, we're going to manage limiting factors. We're going to do all the things to make the property great. And then after a year, we'll start fine-tuning the hunting locations, because some of these giant properties, you really don't know what these deer are doing, where exactly what's going on. So once you get that idea set, we set the property up. And then the setup is so you can get in and you can get out, and that makes all the difference in the world. So if we use the screens, or if we use some native screenings or whatever, dude, I've taken you'll laugh. I've actually cut stuff and piled up brush where I could get in a drainage like you were talking about, pop out of the drainage, get behind the brush, and then pop up in the stand so you can't be seen, you know. Just anything like that, getting in and getting out. I don't think people think about, they may think about the getting in, but they don't think about the getting out, especially hunting food plots, and we're primarily talking about that. You will blow so many deer out. It's dark. You don't even know what's there. So if there's and that's pressure. So the more pressure that you put on them, even the does. I don't even want to put pressure on the does, especially in the South. You from Alabama, you know what these does are, man. They're just crazy. So I don't want to put pressure on them, because I know the bucks are going to be coming after them. So if you start blowing them out several times, then they're going to start coming out at dark or whatever. So getting in, getting out is important. That's where some of the screening stuff will do. So just always keep that in mind.
So, all right, Graham. So I know you got to go because you got to work this morning, yeah?
Yeah, I got to go get some stuff done before PT this afternoon.
Oh, man.
All right, so you got any questions you want to ask him before you got to hop off here, buddy?
I mean, I would just like to ask, I mean, what would you say is for somebody that's just getting into hunting, wanting to start their own food plot, what would you say is the best source of nutrition for them to go and get to put into the ground?
Well, you know, the biggest thing, again, these are always loaded questions. So if somebody's getting started, and I get this question, you can't imagine how many times I get this question. So many times people think that, okay, I want to start a food plot, and you don't treat it like you should treat it. And if you will do whatever you can to break that soil up the best way you can, if you'll go test that soil, take the time and go get a soil test, put the right amount of fertilizer, right amount of lime down, if you'll do those things, adequately prepare the soil, first getting started, it don't matter what you plant. You're going to get success. You're going to see it green. And that's what anybody who's just getting started, they want to see it grow. You know, they want to feel successful. And now I would say use some kind of blended product. There's 1,000 of them that's out there with wheat, oats, clover, and some brassicas in it. Or you make your own there from the co-op, or whatever you do. I always suggest getting a good quality seed. Sometimes you can buy the co-op blend and it's good, and sometimes it's garbage. But if you'll buy, you know, a biologic, a Tecomate, a whitetail, an antler king, whatever, I don't care what you buy, and they all have these blended type products that's got a little bit of everything in it, something's going to grow, you know. But the biggest thing is get that soil prepared as best as you can. Put more effort on that than the seed. Now, once you've got that first year behind you, then you can start playing around with it. You see what did well, you see what grows well, and then you can take it to the next level. But hey, work that soil, get that soil as good, as prepared as good as you possibly can, and then use some kind of blended product with everything in it. Again, everybody's got it. You know, wheat, oats, clover. We have a Greenfield blend that I love that's got all of that in it, and something's going to grow. You're going to get results out of that, and then you can kind of be nitpicky after that. So that's usually my answer to that particular question that you gave.
All right, fellas, well, I'm going to get out of here. Appreciate you, Mark.
Yeah, man.
And I'll
Appreciate
holler at
you.
y'all later.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
See you, Graham.
Have fun working out, buddy.
All right, see y'all.
So now that you asked that, let me ask you this. You don't need to get into great detail, but like, what's your process when you're planting a food plot? Like, test the soil, then round up. Then once you get the round up, disc to get it broken, then rotivate to get it finer. Call to pack seed, call to pack fertilizer. What?
Yep. Well, it all depends on what equipment you have. So there's the thing too. So I mean, I've got access to every piece of equipment that you could think of, and then some. And actually working too, that's been really fun with the Bobcat guys in actually putting my input on building food plot planners. It's been so fun working with those guys. So I'm just saying, I've got the access to everything. So what I do may not be what everybody else can do. But let's just shoot for the middle, Clayton, because I think somebody could do a little more or maybe do a little less with that. Let's try to shoot for the middle. And I've also, Clayton, planted food plots every way known possible, from holding it in a 5-gallon bucket and throwing it out to dragging it with the cedar top. All right.
I saw that. I saw a picture of it.
And hey,
that was recent.
And the food plot looked great. You know, I did all I could do with the resources that I have. So that's the important thing. So I know there's a lot of different diverse people that's out there saying, well, I ain't got the stuff to do it. Well, do all you can do with the resources that you have. Don't let that be an excuse. All right. So what I typically do right out of the gate, wherever I'm going to plant, let's say brand new ground, and there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can, number one, I'm going to usually have to go in and bush hog it or clip it or mow it down, because stuff is in Mississippi. If ground's not been planted and used, it's, it could be 10 foot tall with stuff. And there was some particular ground on my family's farm that I'm trying to revamp. And, man, I had stuff that was way over the tractor. So I had to clip it, and I clipped it down, and it was so much thatch there, I had to burn it off. So because there was a lot of stuff there. Ended up clipping it and burning it 2 different times. There was so much stuff there. So I'll clip it, burn it all off, burn all that thatch and all that stuff off, and there's still a good bit there. It was so much of it. And then I'm going to disc it up, probably made 3 or 4 passes with my disc. And then I allowed it to sit and just let whatever native plants that was there grow up. And what that is what was in the seed bank. So, so many different times I've heard this, and again, you can't imagine the questions I get. Well, I disc everything up, planted it, and I got all these weeds. Well, I guarantee you they didn't come out of my bag, because the quality control that I have to deal with, and that's part of the thing that I do, is deal with the quality control. It don't say Tecomate until I say it says that, because there's so many different things that I have to go through. And there is some weed seed that you may get a 50-pound bag, and there may be 5 weed seeds in that whole entire bag, 10 weed seeds, maybe 20 weeds, which is not a lot. I'm just saying it didn't come from the bag. So what it came from is what's called the soil bank. And weed seed, I'm just going to tell you all this. Some certain weeds can stay dormant for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, can stay in that seed until conditions get right, and then they're going to grow. All right?
So they're like a cockroach.
100%. 100%. So I'm not even going to spray anything, because I've already bush hogged it. I've already burned the top off of what was there. I've disked everything up, and I've broken up the root balls of whatever was there. So I don't need to spray at that point. Now you can, because when you spray it makes it a little easier to disc. But I have big equipment, and I can do that. If you have small equipment, a little disc 4-wheeler or whatever, maybe you want to spray one time and kill all of that off. Maybe burn it or whatever so you can disc it. But I'm just saying what I did just here recently to give an example. So then once I worked the ground up, I let it sit dormant for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then allowed whatever was in that soil bank to grow up. And you can't imagine the grasses. It looked like a food plot after 3 weeks of disking. I didn't even plant anything. And what it was all of those weeds growing up, all right? So then I went and sprayed it with Roundup and killed all of that. Then I disc it again, and then I run a drag. I have a big, what I call a section drag. It's a 10-foot drag, and at some properties I have bigger than that, but I have a 10-foot drag. It's 10 by 4, and it has these little spikes that run on it, and I drug all of that off. What that does, it knocks clods down, smooths out any low spots, or knocks down the high spots and all of that kind of stuff. And I have a planter that plants and cultipacks at the same time. Actually, it cultipacks, plants, and then cultipacks again behind it. So it's one pass. But if I didn't have that, which I've done in the past, is I will cultipack everything, especially on fall plantings. That knocks down the clods and stuff again. Then I'll broadcast all the seed out, and then I'll run the cultipack over again. So
and those fall seeds, a lot of them, like the turnips, they're really small.
They're very, very small.
You don't want to get them too deep.
You don't. And if you get them over an inch deep, they're not going to grow. A lot of times you get them over a half inch deep, they're not going to grow. But I meant to say as well, you mentioned the fertilizer, and I didn't mention that section of that. So once I have sprayed it with Roundup, and soon as I spray that with Roundup, that's when I put the fertilizer in. And then I actually disc the fertilizer in the ground. And that's one of the things that people do not do in planting food plots. You want that fertilizer in the dirt. So
see, we've never done it that way.
Right. So once you put
something new.
Once you put it in the dirt, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to leach out. It's not going to run off. It's in the soil. Also, where the roots are going to be. The roots are going to be down deeper. So once it germinates, and you're actually, when you disc it in, you're going to put fertilizer in all of that top 4 to 6 inches. Now you spread the fertilizer out in that soil profile. Does that make sense? So you got a little bit of fertilizer on top, you got some in the middle, but you also got some deep. So as that plant's growing, he's constantly in fertilizer. So a lot of times when you plant, you put your fertilizer and seed out. Now you got a layer of fertilizer and a layer of seed. Well, what if you get just a little bit of light rain and then you don't get rain for a month? Well, that fertilizer will burn the seed and you don't get the germination that you need. Or you get a new plant coming up and it just sits there. You get a crust of fertilizer that's on top of the soil that seed's trying to grow, and it burns that young plant. So always disc it in. Take that extra measure before that last disking, or what you can do if you've already disked, put the fertilizer out and then run that drag over it. That also will help get that fertilizer in the soil. That's another big tool that will help. Same thing with lime. If you need to lime, and what lime does when you check your pH, if that pH is less than 6, typically you're going to need some lime. And in the South, we always have to have lime. That perfect pH is 6.5 to 7. And so if it's not that, you're going to, and if you got 6, you're fine with fall food plotting. It's fine. You could add some if you want to. But if it's definitely less than that, you're going to need some lime, and it's a lot of it. But it's the same thing. You want to try to work that lime into the soil. And if you watch any of your ag guys, that's what they're doing, And it makes all the difference in the world. Now, there are some other methods. There's some liquid fertilizers out there now that folks are using. There is fertilizer that people put out after the plants are growing. That's a foliar application. Those are options. I don't use them as much because, man, I don't want to drive through my food plot that I've already planted. Because a lot of times in the South, once we start getting rain, we get a lot of rain, and all you're going to do is rut up your food plot.
Yep, you have a bunch of 2 tracks through it.
Absolutely.
Now, Jay, let me ask you this: what do y'all use to plant? Jay, do you guys use a disc? Do you use a rotavator? Both? What?
We got both at our farm.
So what's your process? I'm curious because we've always used the rotavator on ours. We've
Yeah.
never really used the disc too much. So, what do you do, Jay? And Mark, what would you recommend? Do you disc then rotivate to make it finer? Just use discs or what, boys?
We it depends on the rocks with the rotavator, right? We got a lot of rock So if you
Yeah,
got a
we
lot of
got it
rock,
done.
it'll eat that up. But a lot of times, like if the ground hasn't been worked, we want to break it up, right? We want to disc it
Right.
and just at least loosen the dirt up, and then come in and you can more fine tune it with a rotavator or not. But I'm not a food plot. Like I've planted a lot of unsuccessful food plots because you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Like that's the
Terry
biggest
plants all
thing.
the corn and beans for you where you hunt.
Well, yeah, the farmers do a great job. That's how they make money, right? Like they know they get it right. They've already limed the fields this year. I watched them do.
Absolutely.
But if another thing like I've learned is like just getting a soil sample, man.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, I went to college with a boy who's an agronomist now, so that's all he does. So like I bounce questions off of him all the time, and he just starts spitting out this terminology. I have no idea what he's talking about. I'm like, hey
Right.
man, just what do I need? Just tell me where do I go to southern states or whatever. Tell me what I need. But man, like I'm not a professional food plot guy. I've made some good ones. I've got one right now that it's not very good. Like it probably needs. I never took a soil sample. It probably
Yeah.
needs lime. Probably needs something
Yep.
sandy soil.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys got a lot of sandy soil
Yeah. Yep.
down through there. But as far as like the farmer, like I mean, it helps out when he's got, you know what I mean? Like it's a
Sure.
1,200-acre farm, and I honestly 400 or 500 acres it was soybeans this year.
Yeah.
I mean, that deer's got plenty of food. There's some still standing,
Yeah.
and it's a thicker farm. But like right now, and he's planted winter rye over his beans, and he's got winter wheat going too.
Perfect.
So I mean, he does it all for you.
Perfect.
Which I'm fortunate for that.
Absolutely.
And then my uncle owns an apple orchard and a pumpkin farm, and so they got all that, and then I'm trying to get some food plots in there in
Yeah.
the winter. But like that's the thing, and apples are funny. Like he's got like thousands of apple trees. The deer don't even care about apples. Like if you got a farm, people are like, "How you got apple trees? It must be awesome." Like it's awesome on a farm that has 4 apple trees.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where you bring them to this area of the farm. I was like, these deer could eat at any apple tree at any time,
Right.
and the apples are an interesting thing because I've taken them because I help them pick sometimes, and like I'll get the ones off the ground and I'll put them in a bucket. And I'll drive them to a farm 10 miles down the road, and I'll just dump them out, and the deer don't even know what they are. They're
Right.
like they don't. It takes them a while before they'll even eat one. You'll see them staring at them like what is this? It's just I don't know, man. The food and the deer density is a big thing on food plots too. Because if you got a lot of deer like they do in the South, that's why they got big plots. Because it's hard to keep a deer. Like you plant 3 acres of soybeans, Clayton, on your farm, you'll never see them.
They'll be gone.
Yeah, you'll never ever see them.
Mark's seen the farm. He knows like you can't hardly plant. I mean, you can't plant soybeans there. They'll get 2 inches tall and that's it.
No.
Yeah.
Now we always said on soybeans, if you can't plant 10 acres, then don't plant them. Find something else to plant.
That's exactly what the biologist for the state. Because my dad was complaining. He's like, "Man, I tried soybeans." He said, "You got to plant at least 10." He's like, and they'll just. That's what my farmer says. He says that first 2 rows around the fields for the deer.
Right. Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. No doubt. And you mentioned I want to throw this in here too, which I think it's so cool with soybeans. We've done this on our farm in Kentucky. We have a farm. A good buddy of mine has a farm in Western Kentucky, and through the years when they did soybeans, we actually aerial seeded in the soybeans right before they cut them with a winter wheat or with one of our blends or whatever with a lot of that in it, and then so essentially the seeds go down, they cut it, and you got all that thatch essentially covers them, and then you got a food plot, and that's what a lot of farmers do now. I actually sold back in the day truckloads of one of our mixes because it had a lot of wheat and a lot of brassicas and stuff in them, a lot of radish and that kind of stuff for cover crops. And I'm like, man, somebody, I think this was in Tennessee, some of the farm ground in Tennessee. They had some of the prettiest food plots you ever want to see like that. And that may be what your guy's doing. So with that being said, if somebody's got a farm with a lot of soybeans on it and the farmer's not doing that, just ask the farmer like, hey man, can I plant this little acre corner where you're bow hunting? And you just walk between the rows, and I have a bunch of buddies that do that. Just walk between the rows with some kind of food plot blend, throw it. It's not hurting the farmer any. It's actually helping him more than anything. He's going to disc it all up or spray it with Roundup, no-till it, whatever. It's going to kill it all anyway. And usually you don't care. So, and usually those little corners, they ain't a whole lot of beans left in them anyway.
No, they smoke them.
And so just go in with the hand seeder, go down through the rows, and plant it. And plant it heavy. If it calls for 50 pounds an acre, plant 100. If it calls for 100, plant 200. And just plant it really, really heavy. And, man, you got a great spot, and you don't have to do anything. It's already fertilized. It's already limed. So seed it really, really heavily because your germination is going to be 50%. So double it, and you can have a great food plot just simply doing that in some beans. You can do it in corn as well. It works okay, but it works much better in soybeans.
My buddy I was talking about, he said he's noticed some farmers, they'll plant beans and corn together. Like they'll start the corn and the beans together, and then they'll harvest the corn. They use the nitrogen or the legume. The beans are legume, right?
Right.
And they'll use that to help get the corn going, and they kind of just sacrifice a bean.
Oh, wow. I've never heard of that on a farming process.
He sent me some pictures where they got the beans between the rows of corn.
That's cool. That's cool. No, absolutely. Any of the legumes, what they do, if anybody doesn't know, and soybeans are legumes, clover is legumes, peas, anything like that are legumes. So they're fixing their own nitrogen, putting that nitrogen in the soil. That's why you rarely see farmers do corn every year. I know down here they don't. They rotate them every year. It's corn, soybean, corn, soybean, corn, soybean, because that corn takes so much out of the soil. Soybeans take very, very little out. They actually put a lot in. So it's going to, and corn is a grass, essentially, and grasses need lots of nitrogen. So, man, that's a great idea. I love that idea. Now, we've done corn and soybean as a deer food plot, and it works great. But I've never seen it done in an ag format. That's awesome. I love that.
All right, folks. Well, we're going to go ahead and stop part 1 of this episode with Mark right here. We're going to pick up with part 2 here in a couple weeks. We're going to continue talking about land management practices like food plots, removing cedars from your property and the benefit that provides, et cetera, et cetera. So tune back in a couple weeks for more on these topics that everyone loves to discuss in regards to making your land better for whitetail deer hunting.